It's just the third day of school, and my cat is going to be out of the bag. After retrieving his CAD case in exchange for the approval letter stamped with the student council president's stamp, even now, this sort of thing was still done on paper, Tatsuya grumbled just before the door to the third practice room, and from behind him came a voice that was on the verge of tears. I'm really sorry. It's nothing you need to apologize for, but Oni-sama, it's because of my fault that I'm causing trouble for you again. Turning around and taking half a step, Tatsuya held his hand above his little sister's head. Miyuki's body trembled as she closed her eyes. But, after feeling the gentle pat on her head, she timidly looked up. Even now, her tears threatened to spill from her eyes. I said this too during the school entrance ceremony, right? I always feel that I'm being saved by you whenever you get angry in my place, when I am unable to get angry myself. Don't apologize. Now is the time to say something more appropriate. Yes, please do your best. Wiping off a tear with a finger, Miyuki smiled, and in similar fashion, Tatsuya smiled, nodded, and opened the door to the practice room. This is surprising. Upon opening the door, this was the line said to him. What is? The one who was receiving Tatsuya at the door was the appointed judge for this match, Marie. I was referring to your unexpected enthusiasm at fighting. I thought you were one who wasn't bothered by the remarks of others. Even while she was talking about her surprise, her eyes were sparkling with anticipation. A deep sigh welled up in his throat, but Tatsuya, with his steel-like self-restraint, describing it in this manner may be a little exaggerating but swallowed it anyway. I thought it was the job of a public morals committee member to stop personal fights. Instead of a sigh, he couldn't help but let loose a somewhat sarcastic remark, while there was not a single sign of Marie rebutting that. This is not a personal fight. It's a formal match. Mayumi said it too, didn't she? The rule of strength is not something applied between the Course 1 and Course 2 students. Rather, it is something applied between Course 1 students themselves. This is the very first time we are using such a method to settle things between a Course 1 and Course 2 student, you see. I see. On the contrary, it is encouraged to settle disagreements by force if they can't be settled by words alone. Didn't the number of formal matches increase ever since you became the chair of the Public Morals Committee, Senpai? Indeed, it did increase. Her calm attitude caused not just Tatsuya, but even Miyuki, who was waiting behind him, to smile wryly. Then, Marie suddenly turned serious and brought her face close. Well, are you confident? At a distance where he could hear her breathing, she asked in a whisper. Miyuki's beautiful eyebrows rose at that overly close distance, but as Tatsuya's field of view was largely occupied by Marie's face, which was giving off a meaningful smile, it was fortunate that he could not see his little sister's overreaction. With her head partially lowered with a pair of upturned, almond-shaped eyes, and in addition to that, a faint, sweet scent drifting toward him, Tatsuya became conscious of his own sexual excitement. In the instant he was conscious of it, to the object called himself, it became a phenomenon born from inside of him, which was then severed from himself. His excitement was converted to mere information inside of him. Hattori is skilled enough to be among the top 5 in our school. If I have to say, he's more inclined towards group battles, and individual fights are not his specialty, but still, there is hardly anyone who can win against him in one-on-one. In an alluring high-pitched voice, Marie whispered those words which were devoid of any sexual charm. I'm not thinking of fighting him head-on. But, without the slightest sign of wavering, Tatsuya replied in a voice which could be said to be more a mechanical than a cold one. You are pretty calm. I've lost a little confidence. While saying that, Marie was clearly amused. Ha! Without saying anything else, Tatsuya gave a vague nod. At a time like this, if your face turns red, which will make you cuter, the number of people who will lend you their strength will increase, I think. Grinning as she stepped back, Marie then walked to the starting line in the center. What a troublesome fella. She's probably the type who would seek chaos in order and bring about order in chaos, thought Tatsuya. To a person living in tranquility, she was a troublemaker. While letting out his first sigh at his human relationships, which were filled with remarkable ups and downs ever since entering this school, he opened his CAD case. The black attaché case contained a pair of CADs in the shape of handguns. He took out one of them, pulled out a cartridge shape from the place where a magazine would be lodged into a real gun, and exchanged it for something else. Except for Miyuki, everyone watched him intently with deep interest. Sorry for the wait. Do you always carry additional storage cartridges with you? The number of activation sequences that could be used with a specialized CAD was limited. In contrast to the generalized CAD, which could store up to 99 types of activation sequences without regard to the systems of magic, the specialized CAD could only store 9 types of activation sequences of a single system of magic. To remedy this disadvantage, CAD devices that could store alternate, exchangeable activation sequences were developed, but since specialized CADs were originally intended for magicians who are strong in specific magic sequences, the need for an increased arsenal of magic is not too high. More often than not, even when multiple storage were carried, most still relied on using one type of magic. However, from Totsuya's answer to Marie's curiosity, it would have been safe to assume he belonged to the minority. Yes, I am unable to smoothly operate the generalized CAD as I can't cope well with them. Hattori, who was standing across from him, sneered slightly upon hearing this, but this did not impact Totsuya's mindset in the slightest. All right, allow me to explain the rules. In terms of either direct or indirect attacks, lethal attacks are forbidden. Techniques that deal permanent disabilities to the opponent are also forbidden. Abilities that cause direct harm to the physical body are forbidden. However, direct attacks that do not result in anything greater than bone fractures are permitted. No weapons at any time. Unarmed combat is allowed. If you plan on using kicking techniques, please remove your shoes and change into the school's soft boots. The condition for defeat is when the judge has determined one side is unable to continue the battle. Both sides please move behind your respective starting lines, and do not activate your CAD until I give the signal. Breaking the rules results in an automatic defeat. I will use my full strength to stop it, so remember that. That is all. Both Totsuya and Hattori nodded at this, walked towards the starting lines that were 5 meters apart, and stood facing one another. Hattori's expression was more solemn than mocking or challenging, but his face still betrayed an easygoing demeanor. The initial position was out of physical reaching distance. Even if the opponent possessed the charging power of a professional soccer player, magic was still faster at this distance. Because this was a magic-based contest, the side with the superior magical attack would naturally have the advantage. In this situation, the one who invoked their magic first would usually win. Even if the initial attack did not completely defeat the opponent, some degree of damage was unavoidable. There were very few people that had the mental discipline to absorb magical damage and still calmly work their magic. Since sustaining magical damage also disrupted the magic creation process, as long as one continued to attack, victory was assured. Also, under the condition that both sides activated their CADs at the same time, Hattori firmly believed that he, a Course 1 student, had no chance of losing against an upstart Course 2 student. CAD was a tool that minimized casting time. Even if someone tried to secretly use a non-CAD-based magical ability before the starting signal, it would still be no match against the CAD's speed. On top of that, how quickly one could invoke their magic using a CAD made up the bulk of an individual's magic technical score. This was the defining difference between Course 1 and Course 2 students. Totsuya held a handgun-shaped specialized CAD. Hattori wore a traditional bracelet-shaped generalized CAD. Specialized CADs had the advantage in speed, while generalized CADs had the advantage in versatility. Nonetheless, even if specialized CADs had a speed advantage over generalized CADs, that alone could not overcome the difference between Course 1 and Course 2 students. And the opponent was a new student. Hattori's conclusion was that there was absolutely no way that he could lose, a consideration that was neither conceited nor overconfident. Totsuya pointed the CAD he held in his right hand towards the floor and waited for Marie's signal. The simulation room returned to complete silence. Just as that silence was about to fill every corner of the room, the formal match between Totsuya and Hattori officially began. Hattori slid his right hand over the CAD. While the action only consisted of tapping 3 key points, not a single spare movement was wasted. Originally, his specialization was in medium-ranged, wide-area attack magic. If anything, when it came to one-on-one close-quarter matches, they were not his forte. But even when we say that they were not his forte, since entering high school the year before, Hattori still stood undefeated in battle. While he might have yielded before the big three, which consisted of Marie, a specialist in both individual and group antipersonnel combat, Mayumi, who could freely employ astounding, high-speed, high-precision shooting magic, and Jumanji, a club captain who had gained a peculiar title known as Iron Wall, Hattori had the confidence that he could hold his own against other students or even groups of teachers. That pride did not come from overconfidence. The simplistic activation sequence that heavily relied on speed was already complete, and in a flash, Hattori had already entered the magic invocation stage. At this moment, he almost let out a cry of surprise. His opponent, that arrogant first-year student, was somehow close enough to fill his entire vision. He hurriedly changed his target and prepared to unleash his magic. Basic single-system movement-type magic. Any opponent caught by this magic would be flung back over a dozen meters and knocked unconscious by the impact, ending the battle. But the magic ended without invoking. There should have been no problems with the activation sequence. His opponent had vanished. While the target of magic sequences did not have to be very specific, if the target that was originally in the line of sight suddenly disappeared, spell failure was inevitable. The Scion information aid that was supposed to keep track of his opponent's status and location vanished without any effect, just as a powerful wave motion approached Hattori from the flank, who was too busy looking left and right for his opponent. 3 consecutive wave motions. Each wave motion overlapped with one another inside Hattori's body, causing massive swaying to break out that ultimately resulted in Hattori losing consciousness. Victory was decided in an instant. The entire match lasted less than 5 seconds, and could be appropriately described as an instant win. In front of Totsuya's CAD, Hattori keeled over. Winner, Shiba Totsuya. Marie cautiously announced the name of the winner. There was not a trace of joy on the winner's face. That expression was appropriate for someone who had merely arrived at the expected result. He gave a short bow, then walked towards the table that held the CAD cases. It wasn't just his posture. He was wholly uninterested in his victory. Wait, Marie called out from behind him. That movement right there. Did you preemptively input a speed ability? Hearing this, Mayumi, Suzune, and Aizawa all began reflecting on the match. At the moment the start signal was given, Totsuya had moved in front of Hattori. At the next instant, he was several meters behind Hattori's right flank. Anyone would mistake that speed for flash step. A normal human body is incapable of that sort of motion. The fact that that is impossible, I think Senpai is more aware of that than anyone. It was just as Totsuya said. As the judge, Marie was closely observing whether CADs were being activated. Not just the obvious CADs, but even for hidden CADs, the flow of science would have been obvious to her. But that wasn't magic, that was a bona fide physical technique. I can testify to that as well. That is Oni-Isama's physical technique. Oni-Isama was mentored by Kokonu Yakumo-sensei. Marie held her breath. For someone as versed in combat as she was, the name Kokonu Yakumo was quite familiar. Mayumi and Suzune did not know of Kokonu like Marie, but they too could not hide their surprise that someone could accomplish such a feat that was normally written off as something that could only be accomplished through the aid of magic. Mayumi recovered from her astonishment. From the perspective of someone who had studied magic, she also had her own question. Was that attack also ninjutsu? I thought I saw the release of Scion wave motions. That being said, her voice and word selection had both stiffened, probably because she still hadn't completely overcome her shock. Generally, inquiring about another magician's unreleased abilities, or even to ask how the ability works, is against the rules. But, for someone such as Mayumi who uses Scion bullets, for Totsuya to use scions that had no physical manifestation as weapons, and exactly how he managed to damage Hattori, these burning questions could not be suppressed. You're correct. The attack was not ninjutsu, but based on Scion wave motions. The foundation of that Scion motion wave came from oscillation-type basic single-system magic. Given that, I still don't understand how you knocked out Hanzu. Causing him to faint was enough. Faint? How did that happen? As he watched Mayumi tilt her head, Totsuya's expression did not become more troubled as he continued to explain. For magicians, scions can be discernible just like visible light and sound waves. This is a mandatory skill for magic, but the side effect is that when magicians are exposed to unexpected Scion wave motions, they frequently misinterpret that their bodies are swaying. This misunderstanding directly affects the physical body. The reasoning behind this is very similar to hypnotic suggestion, where people under hypnosis are induced into thinking they suffered burn injuries, then find out that the physical symptoms reflect their thinking. During the match, I used this illusion of swaying motions, causing him to feel an extreme case of seasickness. I can't believe it. Magicians are usually exposed to sine wave motions, and thus become accustomed to these surges. For external systematic magic, both activation sequences and magic sequences are types of sine wave motions. And yet despite this, to be able to disable a magician through sine surge alone, and to cause such a strong effect, exactly how? The one who answered Mayumi's question was Suzune. Compound waves. Rin-chan. Just this short sentence was not sufficient for the intelligent Mayumi to understand. Naturally, Suzune's explanation wasn't finished. By consecutively creating 3 varied vibrations, then have their intersection point at Hatorikuan's location, thus creating an equilateral surge through these powerful wave motions. To think you were capable of making such precise calculations. Quite the explanation, Ikihara-senpai. Although Suzune was also quite shocked at Totsuya's calculation abilities, she also deserves considerable credit for comprehending the mechanics after seeing it only once, Totsuya thought. However, Suzune's real question was in another area. Speaking of this, how were you able to consecutively invoke vibration magic 3 times? If your technical speed is so high, how come your technical score is this low? At such a direct reference to his low scores, Totsuya could only force a small smile. Ever since laying eyes on Totsuya's CAD, Aizawa could not calm down in the slightest and now tentatively offered a question. Totsuya-kun, is that CAD the silver horn? Silver horn? Silver, as in the silver from that mysterious genius magic designer Taurus Silver? At Mayumi's question, Aizawa visibly brightened. At times described as a device geek, Aizawa happily explained away. That's him. The miraculous CAD engineer associated with Four Leaves technology, whose name, appearance, and data all remain a mystery. The genius programmer who was the first in the world to make the loopcast system a reality. Loopcast system is the activation sequence that skips the step of restarting each activation sequence. If the magic sequence is the same, then the CAD no longer has to restart the activation sequence each time. This is done by adding a copying power to the magic calculation area's execution mode, adding a copy of the activation sequence's last parts to the activation sequence itself, so magicians can endlessly invoke magics within their ability. Although the theory existed in the past, but to calculate the invocation sequence and copy the activation sequence separately at the same time, no one could do it until now. Stop. I know what loopcast is. In that case, Silver Horn is the name of the fully customizable specialized CAD developed by Taurus Silver. Naturally, it has the best adjustments for the loopcast system, is able to invoke magic stably using the least amount of magic power, is critically acclaimed, and is especially popular among the law enforcement population. Although it's sold on the market, but that requires a special procedure and fee. And judging from the way the barrel is longer than the traditional model, yours must be a limited edition model. Where did you get that? A-chan, calm down a little. Maybe it was because of asthma, but Aizawa's chest was heaving as her eyes were glued onto the item held in Totsuya's hand. If Mayumi, who was well aware of Aizawa's interests, hadn't been on hand to stop her, she would have probably been admiring it from a very close proximity. On the other hand, Mayumi still had another question. But, Rin-chan, isn't that strange? No matter how capable the loopcast CAD is, loopcast still can't. After the talking stopped, Suzune nodded as she tilted her head like Mayumi. That is strange. Loopcast is designed for consecutively casting one type of magic. Even if it is the same vibration magic, if the wavelength and number of vibrations set by the magician changes, these would cause differences to occur within the activation sequence. If the loopcast automatically copies the original activation sequence, then it would be impossible to account for the differences in order to achieve compounding waves. If you set the number of vibrations as another variable, then it may be possible to use the same activation sequence to achieve compounding waves while still accounting for all the differences. But if target, strength, time of duration are all variables, and you include number of vibrations as another variable, don't tell me you managed to calculate all of that. This time even Suzune was stunned to the point of speechlessness, and under her gaze Tatsuya merely shrugged. It doesn't matter if it's multivariable quantitative processing speed, calculation scale, or even interference strength. None of these are subjects that are assigned a grade. Before Mayumi and Marie's gaze, Tatsuya remained ambivalent as he said that aloud. The evaluation of magic technical skills only includes invocation speed, the scale of the magic sequence, and phenomena rewriting ability. I see now. So the test is not capable of completely measuring a person's ability. With a groan, Hattori sat up and answered Tatsuya's ironic statement. Hanzu-kun, are you alright? I'm fine. Mayumi bent at the waist and looked over Hattori. In response, Hattori quickly dodged the incoming face and hurriedly got to his feet. I see, so you were all worried about this from the beginning. Hattori could not have said this if he had not overheard their earlier conversation. Mayumi straightened herself, then nodded with a look of understanding on her face. Hattori was directly facing her. No, in the beginning I really hadn't realized. Still flushed in the face, he hurriedly searched for an argument. After I lost consciousness I was still in a hazy state. I only regained movement just now. Put it this way. It looked as if it was very easy to understand the underlying emotions. Is that so? Then you must have understood completely what we just said. Yes. Even if still hazy, my ears could still hear the words. It seemed like Mayumi perfectly understood the feelings Hattori held towards her. Evil woman. Even if there was this impression, but the connotations behind those words did not adequately fit her surroundings, Tatsuya decided to stop pursuing this line of thought. Whatever the reality was, there was also the possibility that he simply misread the situation. Tatsuya continued the work that was interrupted by Marie's shout. Putting it like that would be overly pretentious, since all he was doing was returning the CAD to the case. Tatsuya pretended not to see Aizawa, who was staring at the object in his hands with an expression that clearly said "do want." Tatsuya also ignored his sister's gaze that suggested she wanted to help. That was because Miyuki wasn't very adept with machines. Mechanical dunce, or high-tech allergies would not be an inappropriate description, especially since Tatsuya's CAD was customized to the point that a normal high school student would not be able to handle them. On the other hand, because the school's CADs only received limited adjustments, Tatsuya could not use them to the full extent of his abilities. The truth was, if Miyuki came to help, it would only increase the workload. He replaced the storage device and reset the safety. The sound of footsteps approached Tatsuya from behind. Looks like the explanations were at an end. What followed next did not concern him, so Tatsuya did not turn around. Shiba-san. Yes. Miyuki replied in a displeased tone. Including Tatsuya, there were only 2 males in the room, so even if the tone was completely different from before, there was no mistaking who the speaker was. Earlier, I made a rude comment concerning your favoritism. There was also no mistake in who the speaker of the voice was talking to. I was the one whose judgment was clouded. Please forgive me. I also spoke too arrogantly. Please forgive me. Tatsuya was also perfectly aware, despite his back facing them, about who was bowing to the other one. Sometimes it was hard to tell who was the older and more mature sibling. Tatsuya pursed his lips and locked the CAD case. He slowly turned around. For a second, Hattori revealed a cowed expression, but quickly returned to a tougher stance. During that split second of peace, was it preparation for reconciliation, or the harbinger for a rematch? Before either possibility could occur, the moment disappeared. In the end, Hattori only met Tatsuya's gaze briefly, before turning around. Feeling the burning fury emanate from beside him, Tatsuya only lightly patted Miyuki on the shoulder. They were going to work together in the same student council from now onwards, so leaving behind any bad blood would only hurt Miyuki. As if Tatsuya's thoughts were telepathically transferred over, Miyuki quickly mastered herself. Let's head back to the student council room. At Mayumi's words, every member began to move. Behind Suzune, Aizawa, and Hattori, Mayumi's face revealed a look that said it can't be helped. Following that, Marie became aware of Tatsuya's gaze, and shrugged as if she didn't want the other 4 to notice.